Picture this. You've spent decades turning a house into a living masterpiece, walls covered in Disney fairy tales. Every corner a testament to your soul as an artist. Then, out of nowhere, you're evicted because the landlord's daughter wants your art for herself. That's exactly what happened to my neighbor. But trust me, she didn't leave without a final, unforgettable act of revenge. If you've ever felt the sting of injustice or the thrill of sweet revenge, smash that subscribe button, like this video, and buckle up for a story where justice isn't just served it as painted over in the most satisfying way. Let's get into it. In a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood just beyond the hum of the city, there stood a house that was more than bricks and mortar. It was a living, breathing work of art. From the outside, it was a charming cottage. Its wooden shingles weathered by time, its windows framed with ivy that clung like a lover's embrace. The garden spilled over with wildflowers, daisies, nodding in the breeze. Roses climbing trellises and bursts of red and pink, but it was what lay inside that turned heads and captured hearts. Every wall was a canvas, painted with murals that danced with life. Disney fairy tales woven into intricate scenes of magic and wonder. Snow White wandered through an enchanted forest, her crimson lips parted in song. Cinderella twirled at the ball, her glass slippers glinting under a chandelier of painted stars. Sleeping Beauty lay in a tower, her golden hair spilling over a bed of thorns. This was the work of Clara, a woman whose life was a testament to the power of art. Clara's love for creation began in childhood. In a small apartment where the walls were bare and the days were long. She was the kind of girl who saw stories in everything, the cracks in the sidewalk, the shadows on her bedroom ceiling. Her parents couldn't afford much, but they gave her a set of watercolors one Christmas. And from that moment, she was unstoppable. She painted on anything she could find, scrap paper, the backs of old bills, even the margins of her school books. By the time she was a teenager, her talent was undeniable, and her teachers urged her to pursue it. She did, enrolling in a local college to study art, where she learned the techniques that would one day transform a house into a masterpiece. After college, Clara became an art teacher at a nearby elementary school. Her classroom was a riot of color, a place where children's laughter mingled with the scent of tempera paint and the rustle of construction paper. She had a gift for drawing out creativity, for making even the shyest students feel like their scribbles were treasures. Art isn't about perfection, she'd tell them, her voice warm and steady. It's about feeling. She spent nearly 2 decades there, shaping young minds, until a spark of an idea changed her path. In her early 40s, Clara started a business called Paint with Wine. It was born out of a casual evening with friends, too much Pinot Noir, and a canvas that ended up more laughter than landscape. She saw potential in it, a way to bring art to adults who thought they'd left creativity behind. The concept was simple. Guests brought their own wine, and Clara provided the supplies and guidance. The first class was a hit, a dozen women giggling over their brushes, paint smudging their fingers as they sipped and chatted. Word spread, and soon Clara was hosting sessions 3 nights a week. She rented a small studio downtown, its walls soon covered with the eclectic works of her students' abstract swirls, clumsy still lifes, and the occasional masterpiece. The business became her second love, a bridge between her teaching days and the artist she'd always been. But it was the house that became her true sanctuary. She found it in the mid-'80s, a fixer-upper listed at a price she could just afford. The realtor had called it a project, with its peeling paint and sagging porch, but Clara saw a blank slate. She moved in with little more than a mattress, a box of paints, and a dream. The landlord, Mr. Thompson, was a gruff widower with a handshake like iron and a heart softened by time. He'd inherited the house from his parents and had no use for it himself. "Do what you want with it," he told her, waving a hand. "Just keep it standing." That was all the permission Clara needed. She started with the living room, painting a mural of the Little Mermaid Ariel, perched on a rock, her tail shimmering in shades of teal and emerald, the sea crashing around her in waves of blue. It took weeks, each brushstroke a meditation, each color a choice. From there, she moved room to room. The kitchen became Alice in Wonderland, the Cheshire Cat grinning from above the stove, his stripes curling around the cabinets. The bedroom was Beauty and the Beast, Belle lost in a book beneath a tree, the beast lurking in shadows of umber and gold. The bathroom was a playful Peter Pan, with Tinker Bell sprinkling pixie dust over the tiles. Every mural was a story, a piece of Clara's soul laid bare. Over the decades, the house evolved with her. When she felt lonely, she painted companionship characters who kept her company through long nights. When she was joyful, the colors grew brighter, the scenes more whimsical. The neighborhood took notice too. Children would knock on her door asking to see the fairy tale house, and Clara always obliged. She'd lead them through the rooms, pointing out hidden details, a squirrel peeking from a tree, a star winking in a painted sky. "This is where dreams live," she'd say, and they'd nod, wide-eyed, as if they understood. Clara's bond with Mr. Thompson grew stronger with each passing year. He'd stop by every few months bringing a thermos of tea and a bag of biscuits, and they'd sit on the porch talking about life. He admired her work, often running a hand over the murals with a kind of reverence. "You've made this place something special," he'd say, his voice rough but sincere. "It's yours as much as it's mine." One autumn evening, as the leaves turned gold and the air grew crisp, he made her a promise. "When I'm gone, this house is yours," he said, his eyes meeting hers. "No rent, no fuss, just keep it alive." It was a verbal agreement, sealed with a nod and a trust Clara never doubted. Mr. Thompson had no wife, no children of his own or so, Clara thought. He spoke of his past sparingly, mentioning only a sister who'd moved away decades ago. Clara assumed the house would pass to a distant relative, or perhaps a charity. She never pressed him for details. Their friendship didn't need paperwork. But when he died, suddenly a heart attack in his sleep at 17, Clara's world tilted. She stood at his funeral, a small affair in a churchyard dusted with frost, her coat pulled tight against the chill. She mourned him quietly, a solitary figure among strangers, unaware that the life she'd built was about to unravel. The news came a month later. Mr. Thompson's estate had been claimed by his niece and nephew, David and Susan, children of that long-gone sister. They lived states away, their lives disconnected from the house and the man who'd owned it. David was a businessman, all sharp suits and sharper ambitions. Susan was quieter, content to let her brother take the lead. When they arrived to assess the property, Clara greeted them with a nervous hope. She invited them in, eager to share the story of the house, to honor the promise Mr. Thompson had made. David was polite but distant, his eyes scanning the rooms with a calculating glint. Susan lingered longer, tracing the murals with a finger, but it was David's daughter, Emily, who changed everything. Emily was 24, with a restless energy and a hunger for beauty she couldn't quite name. As she stepped into the house, her breath caught. "It's like a dream," she said, her voice soft but edged with something possessive. She moved from room to room, her fingers brushing Ariel's tail, Belle's book, the Cheshire Cat's grin. "I could live here," she murmured, and Clara felt a pang of unease. Weeks later, the eviction notice arrived. It was a cold, formal letter, citing unauthorized alterations and a lack of a written lease. Clara's heart sank as she read it, the words blurring through tears. The murals, her life's work, were being twisted into a weapon against her. She called David, her voice trembling as she explained the agreement with Mr. Thompson, the decades of care she'd poured into the house. "That's a nice story," he said, his tone clipped, "but it's not legally binding. My daughter wants the house, and I'm within my rights to reclaim it," Clara pleaded, offering to buy it, to pay rent, anything to stay. But David was immovable. "It's not personal," he said. "It's business." Emily, he explained, had fallen in love with the murals and dreamed of making the house her own, a quirky retreat she could show off to friends. Clara saw the truth then. They weren't just taking her home. They were stealing her art, her legacy, with no regard for the woman who'd created it. The eviction notice was a death knell, echoing through Clara's days and nights. Out. She wandered the house, her fingers trailing over the murals, each one a memory she couldn't bear to lose. The living room smelled of salt and sea, a reminder of the first mural she'd painted. The bedroom carried the faint scent of roses, a nod to Belle's garden. These weren't just walls. They were her diary, her refuge, her children. Losing them felt like losing herself. Her friends gathered around her, a chorus of outrage and sympathy. "It's theft," said Maria, a former paint with wine regular, slamming a fist on Clara's table. "They can't do this." But they could, and they were. Clara's lack of a lease left her defenseless, a tenant at the mercy of a landlord's whim. She hired a lawyer, a kind man with tired eyes, but he shook his head after reviewing the case. "Without a contract, you've got no standing," he said gently. "I'm sorry. The search for a new home was a slow torture." Clara was 72 now, her knees stiff from years of standing at easels, her savings modest. She visited apartments too small for her canvases, houses too far from the community she loved, rentals with landlords who eyed her age with skepticism. Each rejection chipped away at her hope until she found a listing in a neighboring stata. Two-story house with a full art studio on the ground floor. It had high ceilings, big windows, and a garden that begged for wildflowers. The price was steep. But Clara's friends pooled their resources, helping her secure it. It was a lifeline, but it came with a cost, leaving her murals behind. That's when Jake, my friend, and a painter by trade, stepped in. Jake was a burly guy with a quick laugh and a love for bold projects. He'd recently bought a high-powered paint sprayer, a beast of a machine he was itching to test. One night, as Clara boxed up her brushes, he leaned against the doorframe, a grin tugging at his lips. "What if we give the house back to them?" he said, "but not the way they expect. Full Rebecca standards, white walls, gray trim, no soul. Let Emily have her fairy tale, minus the magic." Clara paused, her hands stilling over a jar of paint. Rebecca standards was our term for the sterile. Flipper House aesthetic houses stripped of personality, painted in shades of boredom. She looked at Jake, then at the walls, and something shifted in her eyes, a flicker of defiance, a spark of revenge. "They don't get my art," she said, her voice low but firm. "Let's do it." The plan took shape over cups of coffee and late-night strategy sessions. First, we moved Clara out. Jake offered his guest house rent-free, a cozy space with a blank wall he begged her to paint. "Something with dragons," he said, winking, and Clara smiled for the first time in weeks. We packed her life into boxes, canvases, paints, books, the little treasures she'd collected over decades, and loaded them into a truck, bound for her new home. Then came the transformation. It was a brutal, beautiful act of erasure. Jake and his crew started with the sanding, using heavy-duty machines to strip the murals away. The sound was a roar, a mechanical howl that drowned out Clara's quiet gasps as she watched from the sidelines. Snow White's forest faded into dust. Cinderella's ball gown dissolved into streaks of primer, Ariel's sea washed away in a haze of sanded paint. Each pass of the sander was a wound, but Clara stood firm. "It's mine to take," she said, her voice breaking, but resolute. When the walls were bare, Jake fired up the sprayer. He masked the floors, the windows, the fixtures, anything that wasn't a canvas for Clara's revenge. The Kills primer went on first, a thick white coat that sealed the last whispers of color. It dried fast, leaving the house a blank slate, a ghost of its former self. Then came the paint, a palette of despair Jake dubbed Rebecca's Revenge, semi-gloss white for the walls, a flat, lifeless gray for the trim, the paneling, the cabinets, even the switch plates. Worked with precision, the sprayer humming as it coated every surface in monotony. House didn't just change. It died, its vibrancy snuffed out under layers of dullness. I walked through the finished rooms, the air sharp with the chemical temps of paint. The absence of color was a punch to the gut where, once there'd been life, there was now nothing. The kitchen, once a wonderland, was a gray box. The bedroom, a sterile cell. Clara joined me, her steps slow but steady. "It's gone," she said, her eyes tracing the blank walls. "Good." The interior was only half the story. The cottage's exterior, its ivy, its wildflowers, its storybook charm was as much a part of Clara's art as the murals. She couldn't leave it intact, not if Emily was to feel the full weight of her loss. Jake's friend Tom, a landscaper with a soft spot for Clara, offered to help. "I'll take it down gentle," he said, "and I'll take the bushes from my yard." Clara nodded, her lips tight. Tom worked with care, peeling the ivy from the walls, dismantling the trellises without breaking them. The wildflowers came next, ripped from the earth in clumps of root and soil, replaced with gravel and sand that crunched underfoot. He added a single boulder, a stark, ugly thing that sat like a taunt in the barren yard. The cottage was gone, replaced by a nondescript box that blended into the neighborhood's duller corners. Clara watched the last rose fall, her hands clasped tight. "It's not mine anymore," she said, and turned away. Weeks later, I was repairing a neighbor's fence when I saw the U-Haul trucks roll up to Clara's old house. I paused, hammer in hand, and asked the neighbor what was happening. "New folks," he said, chuckling. Didn't last long, though. The girl fancy thing, all excited, took one step inside and froze. Looked like she'd been slapped. They drove off without unpacking. I grinned, imagining Emily's face as she crossed the threshold. She'd dreamed of a fairy tale, but Clara had left her a nightmare house so empty of joy it might as well have been a tomb. The revenge was subtle, surgical, a masterstroke of absence. Emily had wanted the art, but Clara had taken it with her, leaving nothing but gray echoes. Rumors trickled back over the months. Emily, desperate to reclaim her vision, hired painters to recreate the murals. But the results were hollow, flat copies, without Clara's spark. The house sat on the market, its price slashed as buyers recoiled from its lifeless shell. David, furious at the loss, sold it cheap, his profit dreams crumbling like the sand in the yard. Clara's new home was a haven of light and possibility. The studio was her first priority, its walls soon covered in sketches dragons for Jake. Flowers for herself, new stories waiting to bloom. She set up easels by the windows, letting sunlight spill over her paints, and began teaching again small classes for locals eager to learn. The garden grew wild under her care, a mirror to the one she'd lost, but brighter, freer. One night, as she worked on a canvas of Phoenix rising in flames of red and gold, she paused to reflect. The house was gone, but she wasn't. Her art lived in her hands, her heart, her will to create. Emily had taken a building, but Clara had kept her soul. She dipped her brush into crimson, a smile tugging at her lips. Justice wasn't loud. It was a quiet, steady reclaiming of what mattered most. Emily stood in the doorway, her excitement curdling into shock. The murals she'd coveted were erased, replaced by walls of cold gray and white. The cottage facade was a memory, the yard a wasteland of gravel and stone. She'd stolen Clara's home, but Clara had stripped it bare, leaving a husk that mocked her greed. Clara, meanwhile, thrived in her new studio, her brush dancing over fresh canvases. She'd lost a house, but she'd won her freedom, her art untouchable by those who'd tried to claim it. Justice came not in fire, but in the silence of an empty shell. Reflective conclusion: Clara's story is more than revenge. It's a lesson in power. Sometimes the loudest statement is the absence you leave behind, a void that speaks when words fail. She turned loss into strength, proving that what's truly yours can never be stolen. Outro call to action: did Clara's quiet justice hit you as hard as it hit me? Smash that like button, share this with a friend who loves a good comeback, and subscribe for more stories of triumph. Drop a comment. What's the slickest revenge you've ever seen? Let's talk about it.